Let's talk about questions. There is nothing that can change the attention, the focus, the energy in a room faster and more effectively than the questions that we ask. Questions are kind of like a lens. You know, if you have a lens in front of your eye, a prescription lens, that lens will change the world that we see even before we open our eyes. Questions change the future even before the answers arrive. Now, if you watched a video where we talked about the operating system in designing gatherings where we change the mixture and we have a new ratio of how much content versus conversation, I know I suggested 3-to-1. By the way, the more experienced a group, the more a group has come together to learn from each other, that ratio should change. A room full of senior leaders or executives that are there to learn, I would always start with a 50-50 ratio. Although the traditional shackles and the shackles of the traditional paradigms and beliefs, meeting conveners won't leave room for that ratio because they're stuck putting content on the stage. But when you start playing with these ratios of content versus conversation, you start to realize the questions are the greatest source of leverage to unlock learning, creativity, inspiration in a room. Let's just take an agenda for a moment. And we have a very simple concept at Xchange. We call it the experiential bookend. And the experiential bookend is based on this idea that you can put on the front or the back end of any piece of content a critical, meaningful, relevant conversation. And I'll give you right now 3 different types of questions that can work really well at different points in different types of meetings or gatherings. The first one is what we call a purpose question. And a purpose question is a question that invites a group of participants to contemplate and then eventually have a conversation around why being in this room is important. Now, a little bit of nuance to this. If you've attended one of our trainings or gone through our guide certification, you know that you want to tweak the questions to be relevant and that you also have an option to make a question broad or general, but also specific to the purpose or the task or the project that has brought a group together. And on top of that, you can invite people to connect with the sense of purpose through various thought joggers. Why is it important to be here for you as a leader or a learner? Why is it important to be here for us as a team or a community? Why is it important for us to be in this room for the world? Because of the difference that the work we're doing makes. So there is a science to how you eventually design and present these questions. But inviting a group to connect with why being here is important is one of the most powerful and important ways to begin a gathering. Not with me, not with the CEO or some senior person telling everybody why it's important. You can do that. But if you want a fundamentally different and far more powerful experience, ask the room and give space for them to have that conversation. Let me give you another very common type of question that often makes a lot of sense following a piece of content. It's what we call an active learning question. You know, let's say you have a teacher or a teaching that comes from the stage that really inspires an audience or a group of participants. Well, instead of just moving on, which is what often happens, remember, from a pure experiential learning theory standpoint, we're not learning anything when a speaker is talking. And that really crosses some people's wires to hear that. You might say, no, I can learn from that content. I understand. However, the difference between passive and active is dramatic. The moment that it becomes active is when we shift from listening or taking notes to being in a conversation with somebody else about the topic matter at hand. So one of the simplest ways to do that is to invite a room. What do you want to take from that presentation? What was most important? What was most meaningful? What was your biggest aha? What was provoked? What do you want to remember? It almost doesn't matter what the word is because the essence here is an invitation to actively integrate, internalize, so that eventually I'll actually implement something from that content. Look at it this way. The Xchange operating system, in these types of questions, in these moments, This is not about a battle between content and conversation. No, 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 no. It's the opposite. This is about how do you get the greatest possible return on your investment of the incredible content. It's through the conversations that will precede or follow. Can I give you one more question type? One other type of question is what we call an action or a commitment question. Now, I'll show you, and this is true of many of our questions. We have 11 types that we teach. I'm just giving you 3 of the most useful here that don't require deeper training for you to use. But let me give you an example at the beginning of a convening. A commitment question could be along the lines of, what's an intention that you'd like to set for how you show up today? And also, as a follow-on, how will you know that you're living that intention? What might it look like, sound like, feel like? That's a beautiful way to not command or control or coerce or tell people to put their phones away. No, we don't do that. We don't have ground rules. Oh my gosh, no ground rules. If we do, we let the participants create them, right? Another way to begin a gathering from a commitment standpoint is maybe not just choosing an intention out of thin air, but if we're working inside of a company or a community that has values that are important to them, maybe we'll ask them to pick one of their values and set an intention to live that value for the remainder of the meeting, the day, the conference. And what will that look like? How will they know? What will it look like, sound like, feel like? You see, these are simple commitments that participants can make early that can change their presence and participation for the remainder of the gathering. You can also use commitment questions on the back side of content or the back end of a meeting. What is somebody going to commit to doing or putting into action leaving a meeting? Now, we at Xchange have a bias. We have lots of biases. And one of them is we always want to begin and end in the heart, not the head. That needs a whole video to explain why. And does it mean we always tell audiences? No, usually we don't. But there's a reason why in the modern business world, where the pendulum is typically overswung on the masculine side, we often want to counterbalance that with a holistic approach to action or commitment. So let me be careful and give you a real example here. Someone might say, John, we want everyone to take action coming out of the gathering. Okay, we can invite them to commit to what are you going to do. But we also, because of our beliefs and our experience, want them to finish by contemplating who are they going to be. You could argue that's a more feminine, more holistic, more embodied invitation. Because for us, human systems are at their best when they are experiencing wholeness. Wholeness means that we're designing not only honoring the whole system in the room, but the whole person. And so we have a deep interest in a balance, in a harmony between the energetic across all the different types of questions and conversations. Bottom line, you can invite an audience to make whatever commitments or declarations to whatever action you would like. If you are inviting a group into action, individually or collectively, I'll give you one other tactical takeaway. We enjoy inviting them to contemplate what's either a big, bold, brave action you could take or a small, simple, immediate action you could take. What we have found is when you give that contrast, those two types of action invitations unlock something really interesting in terms of possibilities for the participants. All right. I hope this last video giving you some questions that you can bring into your interactions so that your designs can be more engaging, so that ultimately you can unlock intellectual, social, and communal capital through these processes. I hope these videos have been useful. Look forward to seeing you at either one of our introductory workshops, our 2 or 3 day conscious convening masterclasses, or even our guide certification for those of you who are most serious about going deep with this work. This is an opportunity of our time. We are living at a time where those who choose to lean in and to be of service as coaches, consultants, conveners, community builders, organizational leaders, through more conscious convenings, you will be rewarded. And I don't just mean financially. I mean, there are very few things that are as rewarding as being able to walk into a room and have a tool not as the hero, but as the host. Not because of what you know, but because of your ability to unlock what everybody else knows. It is one of the most rewarding, fulfilling, and impact-generating skill sets of our time. And if I get to meet you at one of our future trainings, that absolutely thrills me. Cheers. Take care.